Commander Jake Harrison stood at the main console in the Earth Defense Station Communications Center, watching the green lights blink across dozens of screens. The station orbited high above Earth, spinning slowly as it monitored space for any unusual signals or threats. Jake had been running this operation for 3 years, and nothing exciting ever happened until today. Lieutenant Amy Foster sat hunched over her workstation with headphones covering her ears as strange sounds filled the air around her. She was the best language expert on the station and could decode almost any human language within hours, but this was different. The signal had arrived exactly 3 hours and 12 minutes ago from somewhere beyond Pluto, and it definitely was. Not human. Amy pulled off her headphones and turned to face Jake with wide eyes. Her hands shook slightly as she pointed to the translation appearing on her main screen. The words were simple, but the meaning made Jake feel cold inside. "Sir, you need to read this right now," Amy said in a quiet voice. "They call themselves the Zilani Federation, and something called the Vex Collective is killing all of them." Jake walked over to Amy's station and read the message that would change everything humans thought they knew about space. The words appeared in English, but somehow he knew they came from minds that had never seen Earth or breathed human air. "To any listening civilization, we are the Zilani Federation. Our worlds burn and our people die. The Vex Collective shows no mercy to anyone they find. We have traveled across the galaxy looking for help from someone who might care. If there is kindness in your species, please help us. We will give you all our knowledge and technology if you give us a safe place to live. Time is running out for U.S." Jake read the message 3 times before he understood what he was seeing. Real aliens were asking humans for help, and they were running from something that sounded much worse than anything Earth had ever faced. He picked up his secure phone and called General Kate Morrison, who commanded all of Earth's military forces. General Morrison arrived at the station 4 hours later with her top people, including Colonel Ben Carter, who handled tactical planning, and Major Lisa Park, who specialized in analyzing enemy capabilities. They gathered around Amy's workstation as she played the original alien transmission and showed them her translation work. The alien voices sounded like music mixed with wind chimes, but Amy had identified patterns that matched emotional distress in human speech. Fear was universal, it seemed, and these aliens were terrified of whatever was chasing them across space. Ryan Walsh came up from Earth on the next transport ship. He was the smartest physicist humans had, and when he saw the technical data the aliens had included with their message, his excitement filled the room. The aliens had sent detailed specifications for technologies that were hundreds of years ahead of anything humans had built. "Look at this," Ryan said, pointing to diagrams that showed ships moving faster than light. "They have anti-gravity systems that work perfectly and energy shields that can stop anything. Their weapons use principles we barely understand, and their computers are smarter than anything we have ever built." General Morrison studied the technical readouts with her team while Jake and Amy worked on understanding more of the alien language. The Zilani had included star charts showing their current location in a dying solar system 3 light-years away from Earth. Their last refugee fleet was hiding there waiting for either help or death. Colonel Carter was the first to notice the most important part of the message. Hidden in the technical data was a warning that made everyone in the room go silent. The Zilani had detected Vex Collective scout ships entering the area of space where Earth's solar system was located. "According to their calculations, we have maybe 6 months before the same force that destroyed their civilization arrives here," Carter said. "The Vex apparently follow a pattern of completely destroying every form of life they encounter, then moving on to the next star system." Major Park had been analyzing the tactical information the aliens provided about their enemy. The Vex Collective used geometric ships that moved in perfect formation and seemed to have no interest in communication or negotiation. They simply arrived at populated worlds and began the process of stripping away all organic matter until nothing lived. Amy found more details buried in the alien transmission about how the Vex operated. They had been moving across the galaxy for thousands of years, leaving dead worlds behind them. No species had ever successfully fought them off, and the few survivors always fled rather than trying to make a stand. The Zilani tried fighting back. At first, Amy explained as she translated more of their historical records. They had advanced weapons and strong defenses, but the Vex just kept coming with more ships until the aliens had to run away or die. Dr. Walsh was most interested in how the Zilani had developed their technology. Unlike humans who seem to build weapons first and think about peace later, the aliens had created everything for exploration and learning. Their most powerful weapons were designed for mining asteroids and hunting food, not for killing other intelligent beings. General Morrison called President Helen Davis on the secure line and briefed her on everything they had learned. Within 2 hours, orders came back, authorizing full mobilization of Earth's defenses and immediate preparation for what could be humanity's first interstellar war. The communications center became the busiest place on the station as teams worked around the clock to establish better contact with the Zilani refugees. Amy led a group of linguists who were learning the alien language as fast as possible, while Ryan assembled every physicist and engineer on Earth to study the alien technology. Jake found himself in command of humanity's first contact with an alien species, and the responsibility felt overwhelming. These beings had crossed the galaxy looking for help, and somehow their desperate signal had reached Earth. Just months before their enemies would arrive looking for them, the Zilani sent more transmissions over the following days, including detailed recordings of the destruction of their worlds. The images showed beautiful cities with crystal towers and floating gardens being torn apart by mechanical ships that moved like hunting animals. Millions of aliens had died, while their advanced technology proved useless against an enemy that outnumbered them and felt no mercy. As Jake watched the recordings of dying alien worlds, he realized that humanity was about to face something that had defeated civilizations far more advanced than Earth, but he also knew that humans had one advantage the peaceful Zilani had never possessed. Humans had spent their entire history learning how to fight, and survival was something they understood better than anyone else in the galaxy. President Helen Davis walked into the secure meeting room beneath Geneva, knowing that the next few hours would decide the fate of humanity. Representatives from every major nation had arrived within 12 hours of receiving the alien message, and their faces showed the weight of what they were about to discuss. The Global Defense Council had never faced anything like this before. The room fell silent as General Morrison began her briefing about the Zilani refugees and the approaching Vex Collective. Large screens showed the alien star charts and technical specifications, while translated recordings of the Zilani distress calls played in the background. Every person in the room understood that they were looking at evidence of humanity's first contact with alien life and possibly their last chance to prepare for war. Senator Robert King from the United States stood up first and argued for trying to negotiate with the Vex Collective. He believed that any intelligent species must have reasons for their actions and that diplomacy could solve the problem without bloodshed. Several other representatives nodded in agreement, believing that peaceful contact should always be attempted. First, Admiral Charles Wade quickly responded with the harsh reality that the Zilani data revealed. The aliens had provided records of 17 different civilizations that had tried to communicate with the Vex over the past 1,000 years. Every attempt at negotiation had been ignored, and every species that tried talking instead of fighting had been completely destroyed within months. The Vex do not negotiate because they do not see other life forms as worthy of communication, Wade explained while pointing to the alien records. They treat planets with living beings the same way humans treat fields of wheat ready for harvest. Dr. Maria Santos entered the room carrying data tablets filled with analysis from the world's top scientists. She had spent the previous night working with teams in 12 countries to understand what the Zilani were offering humanity. Her findings changed the entire discussion about how to respond to the alien request for help. The aliens are not just asking us to save them, Maria said as she activated a holographic display showing Zilani technology. They are offering to turn humanity into a space-traveling civilization overnight. They're faster than light engines could take us to any star system within days instead of centuries. The implications of instant space travel hit everyone in the room immediately. Humanity could spread across the galaxy and never again face extinction from a single threat attacking Earth. The Zilani technology could give humans access to unlimited resources and living space among the stars. Captain Steve Rogers had been waiting outside the meeting room for 2 hours, hoping to volunteer for whatever mission would come next. He was Earth's most experienced test pilot and had flown every experimental aircraft built in the past 10 years. When General Morrison called him into the meeting, he knew his life was about to change forever. "We need someone to make contact with the Zilani refugees and verify their claims," Morrison told Rogers. "This will be humanity's first interstellar flight and possibly our most important mission ever." Rogers accepted the assignment immediately and began selecting his crew from the best people available. Navigator Lavra Kim had guided more successful space missions than anyone else alive. Engineer Paul Johnson could fix any machine ever built and had designed half of Earth's current spacecraft systems. Communications Officer Grace Turner spoke 12 human languages and had trained for years in theoretical alien contact protocols. The spacecraft designated for the mission was the UES Endeavour, which had been under construction for 3 years as an experimental long-range exploration vessel. Teams of engineers worked around the clock to install the first human-built faster-than-light drive using plans reverse-engineered from Zilani technical specifications. Dr. Santos led the engineering teams who were adapting alien technology to work with human systems. The Zilani had provided complete blueprints for their anti-gravity generators and energy shield systems, but human engineers immediately began modifying the designs. Where the aliens had created elegant solutions for peaceful exploration, humans started thinking about military applications. General Morrison received authorization to begin full mobilization of Earth's military forces. The emergency protocols that had been developed for global threats activated defense systems that most people did not know existed. Hidden factories across every continent retooled their production lines for wartime manufacturing while recruitment centers opened in major cities worldwide. The response from ordinary people surprised even the military leaders. When news of the alien threat was released to the public, millions of volunteers lined up at recruitment stations. Engineers and scientists quit their jobs to work on defense projects. Retired military personnel returned to active duty. Entire industries shifted to producing materials needed for the war effort. Factory workers in Detroit began building the first human energy weapons based on Zilani designs. Shipyards in Japan started construction of orbital defense platforms. European scientists worked on improving alien shield technology. Research facilities in Australia analyzed Vex attack patterns looking for weaknesses. The scale of preparation was unlike anything in human history. Every nation contributed resources without hesitation because everyone understood that the Vex threat would not discriminate between countries or political systems. This was about the survival of the entire human species. Military bases around the world became centers for testing new weapons and defensive systems. The first human-built energy shields were installed at critical facilities within 2 weeks of receiving the alien technology. Anti-gravity systems revolutionized aircraft design, allowing fighters to maneuver in ways that defied everything pilots thought they knew about flying. Admiral Wade oversaw construction of the solar defense grid, which would turn Earth's entire star system into the most heavily fortified location in known space. Weapons platforms were hidden throughout the asteroid belt. Shield generators were built on the Moon and Mars. Early warning sensors were placed at the edges of the solar system. The project consumed resources at a rate that would have bankrupted any single nation, but the combined effort of all humanity made it possible. Mining operations expanded to extract materials needed for the defense systems. Power plants were built to supply energy for the new weapons. Transportation networks were improved to move supplies and personnel quickly. Captain Rogers and his crew spent every available hour training for their mission to contact the Zilani refugees. They studied the alien language that Amy Foster and her team had decoded. They practiced operating spacecraft systems that used technology humans had never built before. They prepared for the possibility that they might be walking into a trap, or that the aliens might not be what they claimed to be. As the UES Endeavour prepared for its first faster-than-light jump, Rogers knew that he was about to make history. Humanity was reaching out to help desperate aliens while simultaneously preparing for a war that would determine whether humans would survive to see the stars. The UES Endeavour dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Captain Steve Rogers felt his stomach twist as he saw what waited for them in the dying star system. Massive ships drifted in the darkness like wounded animals seeking shelter from a storm that had already destroyed everything they loved. The Zelani refugee fleet was bigger than Rogers had expected, but also more damaged than any of the human crew had imagined possible. Navigator Lavra Kim checked her instruments twice before she believed what they were telling her. The alien ships were enormous, with some of them stretching for miles in length, but they showed signs of battle, damage that spoke of desperate fights and narrow escapes. Holes had been burned through thick armor plating, and entire sections of ships had been torn away by weapons that must have been incredibly powerful. Engineer Paul Johnson whistled softly as he scanned the alien vessels with the Endeavour sensors. The technology readings were off the charts compared to anything humans had built, but the ships looked like they had been through hell. Emergency repairs were visible everywhere, and some vessels appeared to be held together by little more than hope and determination. Communications Officer Grace Turner established contact with the lead Zelani ship using the translation protocols that Amy Foster's team had developed back on Earth. The alien response came immediately, as if they had been waiting and watching for any sign that help might finally arrive after years of running and hiding. The voice that answered was musical and strange, but the emotion behind it was something any human could understand. Relief mixed with desperate hope filled the transmission as the aliens invited the human ship to dock with their command vessel. Rogers accepted the invitation, knowing that this moment would be remembered as long as humanity existed. Ambassador Zethka met the human crew at the airlock, and Rogers was surprised by how the alien looked. The Zelani stood nearly 8 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly in the dim lighting of their ship. Large eyes dominated a face that was both beautiful and deeply sad. When Zethka spoke, the translator device turned the musical alien language into words that made Rogers feel sick. We have been running for so long that many of our people have forgotten what it feels like to hope, Zethka said while leading the humans through corridors filled with refugee families. Your arrival means that perhaps we are not the last civilization that cares about others. The tour of the refugee ship showed Rogers and his crew the true scale of what the Vex Collective had done to the Zelani people. Thousands of aliens lived in spaces meant for hundreds. Children who had never seen their homeworlds played quietly in corners while their parents worked constantly to keep the old ships functioning. Everyone looked tired in a way that went deeper than just needing sleep. Zethka brought the humans to a viewing chamber where they could see recordings of the Vex attacks on Zelani worlds. Rogers watched in horror as mechanical ships descended on beautiful cities and began tearing them apart with methodical efficiency. The aliens had built their cities like works of art with crystal towers and floating gardens, but the Vex reduced everything to rubble in a matter of hours. Navigator Kim recorded everything she saw while trying not to think about what would happen if those same ships reached Earth. The Vex vessels moved like insects following some kind of hive mind intelligence that coordinated their attacks perfectly. No wasted motion and no mercy for anyone who got in their way. Engineer Johnson worked with Zelani technicians to understand their weapons and defensive systems. What he learned shocked him more than anything else he had seen. The aliens had developed their technology for exploration and peaceful research. Their strongest weapons were designed for mining asteroids and hunting food animals, not for fighting wars against other intelligent species. Your people have never fought a real war, have you? Johnson asked one of the Zelani engineers. The alien looked confused by the question, as if the concept of organized violence between civilizations was too strange to understand easily. We had disagreements sometimes between different worlds, But we always talked until we found solutions that worked for everyone, the alien engineer replied. The idea of building weapons specifically to kill other intelligent beings never occurred to us until the Vex came. Communications Officer Turner established a direct link with Earth and began transmitting everything they had learned back to the defense teams. The message was clear and urgent. The Zilani were genuine refugees fleeing from an enemy that had already destroyed dozens of civilizations. The Vex Collective was real, and they were heading toward Earth with the same methodical approach that had worked against every other species they encountered. Back on Earth, the response to the first contact report was immediate and massive. Dr. Santos led teams of scientists who began working around the clock to reverse engineer every piece of Zilani technology they could understand. But where the aliens had created elegant solutions for peaceful purposes, humans immediately began thinking about how to turn everything into weapons. The first human-built energy shields were installed on military bases within days of receiving the technical specifications. But human engineers did not just copy the alien designs. They modified the shield generators to handle much higher power levels and built backup systems that could keep them running even after taking heavy damage. Anti-gravity technology revolutionized human aircraft design, but not in the way the Zilani had intended. Where the aliens used antigrav for smooth, comfortable transportation, humans built fighters that could change direction instantly and withstand forces that would crush any normal pilot. Test pilots volunteered for dangerous experiments to find the limits of what the new technology could do. General Morrison oversaw the construction of the solar defense grid, which was turning Earth's star system into a fortress unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Weapons platforms were hidden throughout the asteroid belt, disguised as mining stations and research facilities. Shield generators powerful enough to protect entire planets were built on the Moon and Mars. The scale of the construction project was staggering. Every major corporation on Earth contributed resources and expertise. Retired engineers came back to work on the defense systems. Students dropped out of school to join the effort. Entire cities reorganized themselves around producing materials needed for the war preparation. Captain Rogers and his crew spent 2 weeks with the Zilani refugees learning everything they could about both the alien technology and the enemy that was coming. When they finally returned to Earth aboard ships loaded with alien refugees who would help with the defense preparations, Rogers knew that humanity was as ready as they could be for what was coming. The Zilani had asked for help and received something they never expected. They had awakened a species that understood war better than any civilization they had ever encountered. Earth was preparing to show the Vex Collective what happened when someone threatened innocent beings under human protection. The Vex Collective arrived at the edge of the solar system exactly 6 months after their scouts had first been detected, and their fleet was larger than anything the Zilani refugees had described. Admiral Charles Wade stood in the command center of Bastion Prime, watching the sensor displays fill with red dots that represented enemy ships numbering in the thousands. Each Vex vessel was a geometric nightmare of sharp angles and dark metal that moved through space with mechanical precision. That made human observers feel cold inside. The alien fleet arranged itself in perfect formations that stretched across millions of miles as they began their methodical approach toward Earth and the Zilani refugee ships that now orbited humanity's homeworld. The Vex had used this same pattern of attack against dozens of civilizations, and it had never failed to break the resistance of any species they encountered. Captain Lisa Brooks commanded the UES Defiance from her position near Mars, where the human fleet waited in carefully planned ambush positions. Her ship was one of 50 vessels equipped with the new hybrid technology that combined human weapons with Zilani defensive systems. The result was something that no previous enemy of the Vex had ever possessed. Commander Tony Martinez aboard the U's Resilience, coordinated with deep space patrol units that had been watching the Vex approach for the past week. The enemy ships moved at steady speeds without any apparent concern for stealth or surprise attacks. They had conquered so many worlds that they no longer bothered with caution when facing new civilizations. the first Vex ships entered the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, expecting to find the same kind of peaceful resistance they had encountered from every other species in the galaxy. Instead, they triggered the opening move of a defense strategy that had been planned by beings who understood warfare better than any civilization the Vex had ever faced. Hidden weapons platforms emerged from asteroids that had appeared completely normal on long-range scans. The camouflaged human installations opened fire with kinetic weapons that accelerated metal projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. These were not the elegant energy beams that the Vex artificial intelligence had been programmed to expect and counter. The first Vex ships to die were destroyed by weapons that their advanced computers could not predict or defend against. Human kinetic rounds punched through alien armor, like bullets through paper, because the Vex had never encountered a species primitive enough to still use physical projectiles but advanced enough to accelerate them to devastating velocities. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Lee led the first wave of human fighters that launched from hidden bases throughout the asteroid belt. His pilots had trained for months to use the new anti-gravity systems that allowed their ships to change direction instantly without regard for the momentum that normally limited aircraft maneuvers. Fighter pilot Jenny Wright pulled her ship into a turn that would have been impossible with normal human technology as she lined up her attack run on a Vex destroyer. The enemy vessel tried to track her movement with defensive weapons, but the flight pattern she was using had never been seen before in galactic warfare. Mike Thompson and Carlos Rivera flew in formation with Wright as they demonstrated tactics that the Vex artificial intelligence could not understand or predict. Human pilots had learned to fight each other in three-dimensional aerial combat for over a century, and those skills translated perfectly to space warfare. Once they had ships that could maneuver properly, the Vex fleet began to adapt their formations as they realized that they were facing something different from the peaceful civilizations they normally conquered. But human observers had been studying Vex tactics for months, and every adaptation the aliens made was met with a prepared countermeasure. General Morrison watched the battle unfold from the command center deep beneath Earth's surface, where Ambassador Zethka stood beside her, witnessing something that the peaceful Zilani had never imagined possible. An entire civilization had mobilized for total war, not just to defend themselves, but to protect refugees who had asked for help. "Your people fight like the legends my grandparents told about ancient warriors," Zethka whispered as displays showed human ships pursuing fleeing Vex vessels across the solar system. "We thought such stories were just myths about creatures that could not really exist." The Zilani had watched in amazement as humanity prepared for war with an efficiency and dedication that their peaceful species could not comprehend. Every human seemed to understand their role in the defense effort without needing detailed instructions. Civilians worked in weapons factories while soldiers trained with equipment they had never seen before. Major Lisa Park commanded boarding parties that used new assault shuttles to reach damaged Vex ships and capture their artificial intelligence cores for study. The humans had realized something that the Zilani had missed during their years of running from the collective. The Vex were not an unlimited force of nature, but a finite resource that could be permanently weakened by destroying their ships and capturing their technology. As the battle spread across the solar system, human forces demonstrated capabilities that no previous Vex enemy had possessed. Ships that should have been destroyed by enemy fire kept fighting because human engineers had built redundant systems and armor that could absorb tremendous punishment without failing completely. The Vex began to understand that they had encountered something unprecedented in their thousands of years of conquest. These humans did not just resist or try to flee like every other species. They adapted to Vex tactics faster than the alien computers could process new strategies. They struck back with increasing aggression instead of becoming demoralized by losses. Human commanders like Captain Dan Foster aboard the UES Retribution and Captain Nicole Hayes commanding the UES Vengeance pursued individual Vex ships across millions of miles to ensure that no enemy vessel escaped to report back to the main collective fleet. This was not the behavior of a species trying to survive an attack, but the actions of Predators hunting their prey, the Vex artificial intelligence. Networks that had coordinated the conquest of entire galactic sectors began to experience something they had no programming to handle. For the first time in their existence, they were losing a battle against an enemy that seemed to become more dangerous with every passing hour. Admiral Wade authorized the activation of weapons systems that had been considered too destructive to test during peacetime. Hidden among the gas giants were mobile platforms, equipped with antimatter warheads that could destroy entire fleets with single shots. Against the Vex mothership, these ultimate weapons would prove their devastating effectiveness. The battle for Earth's solar system was becoming something that would be remembered across the galaxy as the day when peaceful civilizations learned that they had protectors who would fight with overwhelming force to defend those who could not defend themselves. The moment that would decide the fate of Earth came when the Vex Collective deployed their planet-killer weapon from the center of their massive fleet. The device was larger than most human cities and had stripped hundreds of worlds bare of all life over the course of millennia. It was their final solution to any civilization that proved too stubborn to die quickly, and it had never failed to end resistance permanently. Dr. Maria Santos watched from the Global Defense Command Center as energy readings spiked across every sensor in the solar system. The Vex Planet Killer was charging its main weapon, which would fire a beam capable of destroying all organic matter on Earth in less than an hour. Everything humanity had built and everyone they had ever loved would be reduced to lifeless dust. But Santos and her team had prepared for exactly this moment. Working with Solani refugees who understood energy shield technology, they had created something that no previous civilization had ever attempted. The global defense matrix was not just a shield around Earth, but a barrier powered by the entire planet's electrical grid and every fusion reactor that humanity had built. The planet killer fired its beam of concentrated death directly at Earth while Admiral Wade held his breath and waited to see if human engineering could stand against a weapon that had destroyed countless worlds. The beam struck the global defense matrix and the energy barrier held firm as power flowed from every corner of the planet to maintain the shield. For the first time in the history of the Vex Collective, their ultimate weapon had failed to eliminate a target. The artificial intelligence networks controlling the alien fleet processed this information and began calculating new strategies, while human forces prepared to show the galaxy what overwhelming force really meant. Captain Steve Rogers commanded the upgraded UES Endeavor as it led a strike force directly toward the heart of the Vex fleet. His mission was not to disable enemy ships or force them to retreat, but to demonstrate the fundamental difference between humanity and every other species the Vex had encountered. Humans did not just defend themselves when threatened, they completely destroyed anything that posed a danger to innocent beings. The human fleet moved through the Vex formations like sharks attacking a school of fish. Ships like the UES Retribution under Captain Dan Foster and the UES Vengeance commanded by Captain Nicole Hayes ignored their own safety as they pursued fleeing enemy vessels across the solar system. No Vex ship would be allowed to escape and report back to the main collective about what they had found at Earth. Major Lisa Park led boarding parties onto Vex command ships that had been disabled by human weapons. Her teams moved through alien corridors with the efficiency that spoke of months of preparation and training. They were not just capturing enemy vessels, but harvesting the artificial intelligence cores that controlled Vex operations throughout the galaxy. The humans had realized something that the peaceful Zilani had never understood during their years of running from the collective. The Vex were not an infinite force of nature, but a finite enemy that could be permanently weakened by destroying their ships and stealing their technology. Every I-core captured made the entire collective less capable of coordinating future attacks. Fighter pilot Jenny Wright pulled her ship into an impossible maneuver as she chased a damaged Vex cruiser toward the outer planets. Her anti-gravity systems allowed flight patterns that defied everything the enemy computers had been programmed to expect from spacecraft. The Vex vessel tried desperately to escape, but Wright stayed with it until her weapons reduced it to drifting wreckage. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Lee coordinated attack squadrons that hunted Vex ships throughout the asteroid belt with the persistence of predators that had found wounded prey. Human pilots had trained their entire careers to fight opponents who could think and adapt, but the Vex artificial intelligence was limited by programming that had never encountered truly aggressive enemies. The battle reached its climax when Admiral Wade authorized the use of weapons that had been hidden among the gas giants since the defense preparations began. Mobile platforms equipped with antimatter warheads emerged from their concealment and targeted the Vex mothership with firepower that could crack planets in half. The antimatter weapons struck the massive Vex command vessel, and the explosion lit up the entire solar system like a second sun. The mothership that had coordinated the destruction of hundreds of worlds was vaporized along with every artificial intelligence core that had directed collective operations in this sector of the galaxy. As the last Vex vessels were hunted down and destroyed, a silence fell across the solar system that was unlike anything in Earth's history. Ambassador Zethka stood in the command center beside General Morrison, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The peaceful Zilani had expected humans to defend their world, but not to utterly annihilate an enemy that had seemed invincible. Your species fights with a determination that we cannot understand, Zethka said while watching displays that showed the complete destruction of the Vex fleet. In 6 months you have not only mastered our technology but used it in ways we never imagined possible. But the humans were not satisfied with simply winning a defensive battle. General Morrison stood before the assembled fleet commanders and issued orders that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The time for hiding behind defensive positions was over, and humanity was ready to take the fight directly to the enemy. "We are not waiting for them to send another fleet," Morrison announced to every ship in the human armada. "We are going to find every Vex installation in known space and destroy them before they can threaten any other peaceful civilization." Within months, human fleets were striking at collective bases across dozens of star systems using captured Vex technology combined with human tactical innovation. Species that had been enslaved for centuries found themselves liberated by warships bearing the symbols of Earth. The galaxy began to learn that when peaceful beings asked for help, humanity responded with overwhelming force. The Zilani refugees, who had fled across space looking for someone who might show them mercy, had found something far more valuable than sanctuary. They had awakened a sleeping giant that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. Humanity announced its presence to the galaxy not as victims or supplicants, but as the protectors of those who could not protect themselves. Years later, when galactic historians tried to understand how a single species had defeated an enemy that had conquered thousands of civilizations, they would point to one simple fact. Humans were the first people the Vex had encountered who understood that some fights could only end with the complete destruction of the enemy. Peace was only possible when those who threatened it no longer existed.